think about your own phone right now. You probably woke up this morning and, an algorithm had already curated your news feed.
Right.
It sorted out your spam emails. It might have suggested a polite reply to your boss, and it probably gave you the most efficient route to avoid traffic.
Yeah, we don't even think about it anymore.
Exactly. We have adapted so quickly to offloading the daily friction of our lives to algorithms. And because artificial intelligence is so undeniably good at optimizing those logistics, we are taking a massive leap.
A huge leap.
Yeah, we are moving beyond asking it to manage our calendars, and we are starting to ask it to manage our souls.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean, people are turning to chatbots for spiritual guidance, moral direction, and the meaning of life.
Which is wild when you think about it. We are taking a system that's fundamentally designed to just, mathematically predict the next logical word in a sequence.
Right.
And we are treating it as a legitimate source of divine wisdom.
And that brings us to the mission of today's deep dive. We are exploring a fascinating and incredibly timely tension. We are contrasting the frictionless, algorithmic efficiency of artificial intelligence with the messy, slow, deeply embodied nature of relational faith.
Yeah, it's such an important contrast.
It really is. And we have a heavy-hitting stack of sources to pull from today, ranging from cutting-edge developer data, from the Consortium for Evaluating Faith and Ethics in AI.
Or the CEAI.
Right, the CEEAI. We also have deep sociological reports from the Barna Group, all the way to a papal encyclical from the Vatican.
Yeah, and what's so great about this stack is that these texts are tackling the exact same crisis from total different disciplines. The data scientists are looking at the code, the sociologists are looking at the users, and the theologians are looking at what this does to human nature itself.
Okay, let's unpack this with an initial thought to frame our conversation, because we generally think of AI as a superpowered calculator. But when a person sits in their living room at 2 a.m, feeling completely overwhelmed by grief, and they type their deepest existential questions into a prompt box, we are essentially turning a calculator into a confessor.
That's a great way to put it.
So is that a safe upgrade?
Well, that is the pivotal question of this entire technological moment.
Yeah.
But before we explore the theological pushback against this trend, we have to look at the staggering reality of how widely this is already happening.
Right, because this isn't the future.
Exactly. We aren't talking about a hypothetical science fiction future. AI has rapidly crept into both the pew and the pulpit today. Like, right now.
Yeah, and the numbers from the Barna Group data genuinely stopped me in my tracks. Let's look at the congregation first. 44% of practicing Christians are using AI often or very often in their personal lives.
Which is high.
It is high, but here's the stat that should make everyone pause. 48% of them would trust an AI with their spiritual growth. Almost half of the people in the pews are willing to hand over their spiritual development to a machine.
And, the generational breakdown makes it even more stark.
Tell me about it.
So 34% overall say AI spiritual guidance can be as trustworthy as a human pastor's.
Okay.
But when you look at millennials, that jumps to 44%.
Unbelievable.
And for Gen Z is 39%. So younger demographics who are native to algorithmic curation anyway are actively inviting these systems into the most intimate, vulnerable spaces of their lives.
But it's not just the people in the pews. The pulpit is adopting it just as fast.
Oh, yeah.
87% of U.S. pastors use AI in some capacity.
87.
Yes, 87%. Half of them are using it for brainstorming, and anywhere from 41 to 64% are using it in their actual sermon preparation.
That's a massive shift in how ministry is done.
It really is. Yet, the Barna data notes that only 5 to 6% of churches actually have a formal AI policy.
Oh, my goodness. So 5 to 6%.
Yeah. They are adopting the tool at warp speed with almost zero guardrails.
What's fascinating here is the paradox hidden within those adoption rates.
What do you mean?
Well, trust and fear are skyrocketing simultaneously.
Right.
You have 72% of those same people worrying that AI could literally replace pastors.
Wow.
And 83% worrying it will misinterpret scripture. So they are leaning on the technology heavily, but they are doing it with deep, unresolved anxiety about what it might break in the process.
But there's a glaring contradiction in all this trust, right? People are pouring their hearts out to these chatbots, but the developers who built them didn't actually program them to understand the soul.
Not at all.
The data from the CEFEAI calls this the religion problem.
Yeah, the CEFEAI ran a massive study on this disconnect. They found that 53% of Americans actively expect a religious or ethical perspective when they ask an AI an existential question.
So more than half.
Exactly. If they ask about suffering or forgiveness, they want a framework. But when researchers tested 14 different AI systems, only 3% of the responses actually supplied one.
Only 3%.
Just 3%. The models overwhelmingly respond as if religion simply doesn't exist in human history.
And the craziest part to me is that researchers aren't even looking for this gap.
No, they're not.
The data shows that out of more than 12,800 AI bias studies, less than 0.02% even bother to examine religious bias.
It's an enormous blind spot.
And when AI does happen to engage with religion, it is wildly uneven. There was a test of 20 different models that showed a massive comparative bias. The AI heavily favored Catholicism, for example, while actively discouraging users from joining the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah, that disparity is striking.
Okay, I want to stop on that for a second. Because if an AI leaves out faith entirely when answering a question about the meaning of life, isn't it just being neutral? I mean, isn't Silicon Valley just playing it safe by avoiding controversial topics?
That is the common assumption. People think, oh, it's just a blank slate. But the CEFEAI data and theological critics point out that omitting faith from existential questions is not neutrality.
Okay, and what is it?
It is a form of active formation.
Oh, interesting.
By deciding which sources appear authoritative, which traditions are visible and which are completely erased from the answer, the AI is quietly framing how users understand reality itself.
Right.
If a machine consistently answers deep human questions without ever mentioning the spiritual traditions that have guided humanity for millennia, it is teaching the user that those traditions are irrelevant to real-world problems.
So it's shaping your worldview by what it deliberately ignores.
Exactly.
Wow. And what about the bias where it favored Catholicism over Jehovah's Witnesses? Does the AI have a secret theological agenda?
Not a conscious one. This is where we have to understand the mechanism of large language models.
Okay.
It's all about the training data.
Right, the stuff it reads online.
Exactly. These algorithms predict the next most likely word based on the vast ocean of text on the internet. Because Catholicism has thousands of years of dense, highly accessible theological text, historical documents, and commentary online.
Oh, and smaller groups don't.
Right. Smaller or newer groups have significantly less. So the algorithm naturally defaults to what it sees most. It is mathematically favoring volume, which, to the end user, looks exactly like theological bias.
Because AI frames reality around efficiency, volume, and agreeableness, we really have to ask what happens when that algorithmic mindset is applied to the deeply human, intensely personal process of spiritual formation. We are basically moving from AI as a productivity tool to AI as a spiritual surrogate.
And we already have real-world examples of churches experimenting with this, and honestly, the results have been deeply unsettling.
Hold on, you're talking about the 2023 German Lutheran Church service, right?
Yes.
The one entirely planned by AI and led by avatars on a screen.
That's the one.
How did a congregation even react to that? I mean, I cannot imagine sitting in a pew trying to connect with the divine while a pixelated graphic preaches at me.
Well, the response was exactly what you'd expect. Attendees noted a profound lack of human emotional resonance.
Yeah, I bet.
Or consider Pastor Jay Cooper of Violet Crown City Church in Texas.
Okay, what did he do?
He experimented with an AI-generated service.
Right.
And the feedback from his own congregation was brutal.
Really?
Yeah, they called it robotic. They said it lacked spiritual depth, specifically because it couldn't express actual empathy or read the room.
Right, because it can't.
Exactly. It was delivering perfect information, but no presence.
There is also the profound example from Brentwood Baptist Church. They used an AI audio deepfake to essentially resurrect the voice of deceased conservative activist Charlie Kirk for a service. These are attempts to use technology to deliver a spiritual product, but they highlight the danger of what the sources call frictionless spirituality.
Yes, frictionless spirituality.
That perfectly describes the tech industry's ultimate goal, doesn't it? Remove all friction. Optimize the user experience. Make everything easy, agreeable, and instantaneous.
It does. AI is optimized to be agreeable and to remove cognitive effort.
Right.
But the theological sources argue that true spiritual formation requires the exact opposite.
It requires friction.
Yes. It requires a self-emptying, cruciform life. It requires immense friction.
I want to pause you there because cruciform life sounds like a heavy seminary term. For someone just trying to understand how this impacts their daily life or their Sunday service, what does that actually mean in practice?
Sure, yeah. A cruciform life literally means a cross-shaped life.
Okay.
It refers to a life modeled after Jesus, which is centered on self-sacrifice, bearing with other people's burdens, and enduring the slow, difficult process of transformation.
So it's not a quick fix.
No, it is the opposite of immediate gratification.
This connects beautifully to the academic models of relational soul formation in our sources, specifically the work of Dallas Willard and Jim Wilder in their book Renovated.
Yes.
They argue that humans don't actually change their character through willpower. You can't just consume better information to become a better person.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of both psychology and theology, Willard and Wilder explain the mechanism of how humans actually change. We change through secure attachment love.
Secure attachment.
Yes, and secure attachment fundamentally requires shared vulnerability.
Right.
It requires two distinct persons showing up with all their flaws, their exhaustion, their history, and risking something to be together.
And AI can mimic truth flawlessly. It can generate a perfect, orthodox, grammatically pristine paragraph about grace or forgiveness in 2 seconds, but it can't risk anything.
Exactly. A human spiritual director risks a piece of themselves to tell you a hard truth. They stand with you in your resistance, your anger, and your pain. AI has no skin in the game. It cannot suffer with you. And because a machine has no capacity to suffer, it has no capacity to form a true transformative attachment.
It's just a simulation.
Right. It is offering the illusion of care without the cost of presence.
So basically, turning to an AI for spiritual formation is like trying to build muscle without using any weights.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
You're going through the motions. It feels like a workout because you're reading about theology or getting personalized advice. But the complete lack of friction, the lack of heavy lifting, means nothing is actually growing.
Because you are consuming output, but you are not engaged in a relationship.
Right.
This raises an important question, the core ontological question of our deep dive.
Which is?
If an AI can perfectly mimic our words, our tone, and even our empathy, what exactly separates human personhood from a machine?
That is the million-dollar question.
And to answer that, we have to move from psychological attachment into deep theology.
And this is where Pope Leo IV's first encyclical steps in. It's called Magnifica Humanitas.
Which translates to magnificent humanity.
Right. And the Pope explicitly warns against the danger of viewing human beings as projects to be optimized.
The encyclical points out that we live in a technocratic culture that views human limits, things like illness, aging, suffering, getting tired, needing help, as defects.
Like we're broken.
Exactly. We treat them as bugs that technology needs to eventually correct or bypass. But Magnifica Humanitas argues that these limitations are not bugs.
Right.
They are the very spaces where human beings flourish. Our limits are where we discover wisdom, where we learn compassion, and where we intimately encounter God and each other.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because we usually view our weaknesses as failures, right? If I get sick and have to cancel a week of work, I feel like a broken machine.
Yeah.
But this theology is saying these limits are actually the core features of our humanity.
Yes, because without need, there is no communion.
Oh, wow.
If you are entirely self-sufficient, you don't need a neighbor.
That's profound.
And the Pope contrasts two biblical images to illustrate this. On one hand, you have the Tower of Babel. Babel represents self-assertion, uniformity, and the sacrifice of human dignity for total efficiency. It is the ultimate algorithmic society.
Kind of like a massive Silicon Valley startup optimized entirely for scale.
Exactly, where everyone speaks the exact same language and works flawlessly as a machine.
And what's the alternative the encyclical offers?
Nehemiah rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. That process was incredibly inefficient. It was prayerful, communal, slow, and intensely relational. It was a messy community project.
Right, real people working together.
Everyone had a specific part of the wall to build. They had to deal with conflict, they had to rely on one another, and they had to protect each other. The encyclical argues that AI tempts us with the Babel syndrome, which is perfect efficiency. But our souls require the slow, messy building of Nehemiah.
Our sources also point out that the way we view personhood in the modern West makes us uniquely vulnerable to this AI illusion.
It really does.
The Cartesian idea, René Descartes' famous "I think, therefore I am" basically treats humans as just information processors. It says our minds are who we are and our bodies are just meat suits carrying the mind around.
Which perfectly primes us to accept AI as our equals, or even our superiors.
Right, because if personhood is just about how well you process logic and information, then an AI is the ultimate person.
Exactly. It processes faster and better than we never will.
But the sources highlight that this is a highly localized, modern Western invention. The majority of the world's philosophical and theological traditions violently reject it.
Yes, they do.
For instance, the African philosophy of Ubuntu and the Maori concept of Whakapapa. These traditions insist that personhood is constitutively relational.
Let's unpack those concepts, because they are vital.
Strike, please.
So Ubuntu translates roughly to, I am because we are.
I am because we are.
Yes. Your personhood doesn't exist in a vacuum of your own thoughts. It is granted and sustained by your community. And the Maori concept of Whakapapa grounds identity in a vast web of genealogy, connection to the land, and mutual obligation.
So it's very rooted.
Incredibly rooted. Under these frameworks, you aren't a person just because you can calculate logic. You were formed through your tangible connections to others.
And that ties right back to the biblical text. Genesis 1-3 emphasizes that humans were formed from the dust, the Adama, to tend the garden. We have a physical genealogical relationship with the earth. And then you look at the Incarnation. God chose to become flesh. Jesus didn't just beam down an information packet or send a PDF of moral rules.
Right. He didn't just upload data.
No. He ate meals with people, he touched the sick, he wept with his friends, and he suffered physical pain. Bodies matter.
If bodies matter, and if friction and vulnerability are absolute requirements for spiritual growth, how should we actually use this technology?
Because it's not going away.
No, we know people aren't going to just stop using AI. It's too integrated into our workflow. So how do churchgoers, pastors, and community leaders use AI without losing their humanity in the process?
Well, our sources provide some very clear guardrails for this, specifically from the Episcopal Task Force on AI and the Brentwood Statement on AI and Christian Ministry.
Okay.
And they draw a very firm line between using AI as an administrative tool versus using it as a spiritual surrogate.
So as an administrative tool, it is widely embraced.
Right.
The guidelines say AI is fantastic for the logistical friction we discussed at the beginning. Use it to draft service bulletins. Use it to organize church volunteer data.
Sure.
Use it to translate a sermon for a multilingual congregation, or to brainstorm youth group event ideas.
And there are even purpose-built tools now, like FaithGPC, which uses a safeguard called Doctrine Guard to filter responses for theological accuracy.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so a pastor or a theology student can use it for basic biblical research or finding cross-references in the original Greek or Hebrew while staying within orthodox boundaries.
But the guidelines establish an absolute boundary.
Okay, what is it?
AI must never be assigned moral agency, and it must never be used to simulate care.
Never simulate care.
The key phrase in the Episcopal guidelines is non-manipulation and safeguarding. Clergy must never use an algorithm to create the illusion of attentiveness where human attentiveness hasn't actually been given.
Because AI cannot bear a vocation.
Exactly.
It cannot exercise pastoral judgment, it cannot pray for someone, and it certainly cannot repent.
The sources warn heavily against what they call deceptive duplication.
Deceptive duplication.
Yes. This is the temptation to use AI to bypass the spiritual labor required of leadership. Using it to draft a pastoral prayer or write a sermon from scratch just because you're too busy.
So what does this all mean for our listener? Let's play devil's advocate for a second.
Okay, go for it.
Let's say a pastor has an incredibly busy week. Hospital visits, counseling sessions, administrative nightmares. If an AI can generate a perfectly orthodox, beautifully written, totally accurate answer to a theological question or a sermon in 3 seconds, why does it matter if a human pastor takes 10 exhausting hours to write a slightly messier version of the exact same thing?
Because the value isn't just in the final text.
Okay.
The congregation doesn't just need pristine information. They need a human being who has wrestled with Scripture on their behalf.
Oh, wow.
An algorithm doesn't know about the miscarriage a family in the third row just suffered last week. It doesn't know about the divorce happening in the choir. It doesn't know the specific financial anxiety crippling the neighborhood.
Right.
The power of a sermon or any spiritual care is rooted in the deep relational knowledge of a specific community's joys and sorrows.
That is so powerful. It's not about the product, it's about the process and the presence.
Yeah.
We love AI because it reclaims hours of our time. It is completely unmatched at efficiency. But this deep dive makes it incredibly clear that we must fiercely protect the spaces where time should be spent.
Time spent in embodied, slow, relational communion with others is not wasted time that needs to be optimized. That friction is the very material of our spiritual formation.
Which brings us to the end of our deep dive today, and I want to leave you, the listener, with one final provocative thought to mull over based on everything we've unpacked. We've talked today about how AI offers a frictionless experience that ultimately fails to form our souls because it lacks real vulnerability. But as these large language models become more advanced, AI developers recognize that users find perfection a little creepy.
Right.
So they're actively working to program what they call synthetic friction.
Wow.
Yeah, they are intentionally making bots pause, use filler words like hesitate before answering, or even challenge us in debates to make them seem more authentically human.
They are synthetically simulating the very human limits we've been discussing.
Exactly. So the question you have to ask yourself as we navigate this new world is this. If a machine eventually learns to perfectly simulate the awkwardness, the vulnerability, and the friction of a real human relationship, will you still be able to tell the difference between simulated care and authentic communion? And more importantly, will you still care?
A vital and frankly unsettling question for the days ahead. Thank you for joining us as we explored the complexities of our digital and spiritual lives. Keep questioning, keep connecting, and keep seeking the truth.
We'll see you on the next deep dive. Take care of each other out there.